Yes, it's been there a while too.
Yeah, so
They would need a special use permit for every installation? Or just large ones?
Been there a while too.
It would be right now for any residential
Oh,
zone.
yeah, yep, okay, for any, that's, yep.
the way they've been dealt with recently, or really up until now, or until the new ordinance comes in, is they're treated as accessory uses. So any rooftop, residential rooftop, and even commercial rooftop, those are all going to be continued to be considered accessory. But any ground mounted, whether commercial or residential, will require a special use permit.
Anyone recognize the scene behind me?
Cape Cod,
Wrong.
Montana.
It's Watch Hill.
Oh, pardon me.
Oh,
I think Mike is a Patriots fan. He's a Boston fan. Oh, that's Bill.
Yep.
Boston fan for all teams.
Hi, Bill.
Hello, everyone. If anyone gets an email from me, about a half an hour ago, I was hacked in a big way, my ICC account and my,
I just signed up.
Yeah,
It's
there
been
was
like 50
something
right?
with, there
Yeah, I
was
saw
something
it,
with your
Bill.
name on it.
I
Yeah.
just got it a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. My
What do you-
phone's blowing up. It's ridiculous.
What are you trying to sell us, Bill? Some kind of,
Life insurance policy.
yeah,
Water from Mars. I don't know.
clothing or something?
Ridiculous.
Well, Paul, you can't go to Watch Hill unless you have a BMW, can you?
You know, when I went there, I had a VW.
I taught a year in Westerly and lived in Watch Hill with 3 or 4 other girls. We rented one of those big mansions.
It's very nice there.
Old money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Late to the party, but Bill, was your email hacked or was that you on purpose?
Oh, yeah, it was.
I guess it went very far and wide, Bill.
Tell
Oh, I
me
can
true,
do it
because
now.
I deleted it. I'll go dig it out of the garbage if I need to, but
No, I mean,
So I should delete it, Bill?
yeah, I don't know. Somebody sent me a screenshot of it and I can't even get to that anymore because I'm cut off. I'm surprised I got into my internet here. I'm surprised I was able to get on.
John, just make sure you open every attachment first, then delete it.
No,
Okay.
no, don't do that.
Yeah. Who said that?
No idea.
Thank God
No.
it wasn't anything, inappropriate. It sounds like it was just something stupid, but it doesn't sound like it was, I don't know. It could be wrong.
I'm ditching it. I just ditched it. Okay, there we go.
It could have been
I have,
another unemployment claim.
I have 5:59, so we're going to be starting soon. Ron, is there anybody else on besides the planning board members?
There's a couple of
Couple,
people.
okay, good. Is Joe not joining us this evening?
I don't know. We'll see if he shows up. Oh, there's the
Yeah,
bell.
I need to go.
What is the bell?
That's Art's
Sarah?
clock.
That's my,
Hang on, I need to jump out on this
1780.
meeting to talk to people.
Okay, I have 6 PM, so we will get this meeting started. I call the meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the planning board to conduct a workshop on new requirements, design requirements for solar, ground-mounted solar voltaic installations. If there are any votes this evening, they will be taken by voice roll call, and we'll start by calling the roll for attendance. Mr. Pyrick. I guess he's not here yet. Mr. Chumo,
Present.
Mrs. Owen,
Here.
Mr. Weber,
Present.
Mr. Fenton,
Here.
Mr. Nash. Looks like we've lost Bill momentarily,
Yeah.
and I am present. We have a quorum, so we'll proceed. The purpose of the meeting is to review and provide recommendations to the town council on proposed amendments, section 400 definitions and section 725 of the Middletown zoning ordinance regarding ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations, including design requirements for all arrays and specific provisions for arrays mounted on carports and canopies. We will start with a presentation from the town planner. Then I will take any comments from planning board members before we open it to the public. And as I mentioned, this is a workshop, so there can be exchange between planning board members and the public. Ron?
Okay, so I will start sharing my screen here. Just have to give it a second for the slides to come up. Hopefully. There it is. Okay. Rita, you gonna take notes for us?
Yep.
Great. And if you could just keep an eye on the attendees list to see if Joe shows up, because I can't see the entire list.
Okay, sure.
Thanks. Okay, so as Paul just mentioned, we're here to have a public workshop about a draft proposed zoning ordinance amendment related to ground-mounted solar and also dealing with carports. So the background is that dealing with solar and really renewable energy generally is addressed in the comprehensive plan. We'll talk about that briefly. We're going to review the draft of the proposal. And then, as Paul mentioned, we'll have planning board comments and questions, and then we'll open it up to the public for comments and questions. And then, so tonight we're at step one here, receiving public input. After tonight, any revisions that the board wishes to make, we can go ahead and make those. If there's an additional meeting needed to have additional discussion, we could do that as well. Eventually, the full planning board at a regular meeting will vote to, if they choose to, if the board chooses to, send the recommendation forward to the town council for consideration. As with any zoning ordinance amendment, the town council must then hold a formal public hearing and 2 readings before it can be adopted. As they conduct their review, the town council can also choose to revise the amendments as they see fit. So for the background, the comprehensive plan, as I said, does discuss renewable energy. One of the policies says promote the use of renewable energy technology. Couple of action items, one being review town regulations and propose amendments as needed to ensure that new development addresses solar access. And then the second action item, which is probably more directly related to what we're doing tonight, review town regulations and propose amendments as needed to allow for the installation of renewable energy technology in appropriate locations in town, taking into consideration potential impacts on the community and the town's scenic, cultural, and natural resources. So I think as we go through, you'll see that this proposed amendment does try to get to those impacts. So the current regulations in the zoning ordinance, there is a section, ground-mounted solar arrays, section 725. It's a very short section. It's a couple of paragraphs, some bullet points, and that's basically it. It does have some limitations for ground-mounted solar with maximum 12-foot height limit for the panels, requires 25-foot setbacks, requires a 25% maximum lot coverage in residential areas. There's actually no maximum lot coverage in commercial zones under the current regulations. Development plan review is required for all ground-mounted installations, except for, and as we were before the meeting started talking about residential accessory uses, currently don't require development plan review. Fencing and screening is required, and then there's requirements for removal of installations if they're not used for 90 days or more.
Okay, is the setback from the abutting property?
Yeah, that's a property line setback.
Okay,
That's the current. So then getting into the draft, the proposal amends 4 sections within the zoning code. It defines, and again, this is sort of arbitrary, but the board can discuss it. It defines 2 levels of review and permitting, I guess. The 1,000 square foot threshold is what we're using. Anything smaller than 1,000 square feet is considered a small installation, and anything larger than 1,000 square feet is considered a large installation, and we'll get into what that means. Small scale solar is allowed in residential zones as an accessory use, and as I mentioned earlier, it does require a special use permit. Development plan review is required for the large scale only, so those installations that are greater than 1,000 square feet, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well, what that means. It amends the dimensional regulations, landscaping, site design, and soil preservation standards. For example, our current regulations do not, I don't believe, have soil preservation as an item to be addressed. So this proposal does introduce some additional regulation. So these are the sections of the zoning ordinance that are being proposed to be revised. Within section 400 of the zoning ordinance is the definitions, and the proposal does add definitions for small and large scale installations. So that's that 1,000-foot threshold again. It also allows for carports or canopies within the definition of a ground-mounted solar energy system. So that's one of the major revisions that we're talking about tonight. Under the current regulations, carports are not addressed at all. So it's been a bit of a challenge for us to work with potential developers of carport solar, trying to fit them into the current zoning ordinance. So this amendment will specifically reference carports. They will be allowed by special use permit in either commercial or residential settings, with some limitations, of course. The scheduled district use regulations, so that's the use table. I basically just said what the changes will be. Basically, any installation is going to require a special use permit. Small installations, those under 1,000 square feet, will be permitted in residential districts. Larger than that, larger than 1,000 square foot installation will not be permitted in residential zoning districts. Carports and canopies are exempt from some of the dimensional limitations under section 703. There's a separate section of the zoning ordinance specific to accessory uses and structures. So there's just a couple of lines added to exempt carports and canopies from that particular section. And then the big part of the amendment is section 725, which is essentially being totally rewritten. So the existing 725 goes away, and the new section 725 is going to be what was sent out to everybody, and it's posted online for those who haven't seen it yet. You can get to it through the planning department page and see the actual draft of the full proposed ordinance, which we're not going to try to put that up on the screen tonight. So we'll get into a little more detail here. So this is the dimensional table. So under the proposal, the maximum height limit for ground mounted solar, not including carports, will remain at 12 feet. with 25-foot setbacks from property lines. And this is in commercial areas. They'll be limited to 50% of the developable land area. As I just said, I don't believe there's any limitation now in commercial areas. By allowing only up to 50%, it does provide some protections to abutters, and you know, as the comprehensive plan suggests, the viewscapes and the appearance of the town will be protected with some limitation of the extent of an installation. And when we're talking about this lot coverage limitation for ground mounted solar, that limitation has to, or the calculation takes into account all of the land associated with the installation. So it's the panels, basically anything within the fenced in area of the installation is going to count towards that 50%. The current ordinance does not have that particular language, so it's been a bit of a challenge trying to interpret that, and it's been interpreted that the 50% or whatever the limitation is would only apply to the panels themselves, which would make for a much larger potential installation than if you include everything within the fence line, which is what we're proposing to do. For solar carports and canopies, again, these are within commercial districts. They'd be limited in height based on the accessory building height limits in section 603. This is a typo. It should actually be section 603 in the zoning ordinance, which is dimensional limitations. In most cases in commercial zones, that's 20 feet, I believe. So that would be the height limit. Again, 25-foot setback from property lines, and again, the 50% lot coverage limitation. And then as we get into residential districts, again, 12-foot height limit. Setbacks are increased compared to commercial. So you'd have a 50-foot setback from residential property lines, and the lot coverage is reduced to 25% of developable land area. But again, remember that installations are limited in residential districts to 1,000 square feet anyway. So I don't know how often that 25% is going to actually come into play. But that's, it's more restrictive than in the commercial areas. And then for carports, so for example, if somebody had a residential carport, or even, and we've talked about this, I think, in prior meetings, in an agricultural area, if someone has an active farm and they have a structure like a carport or a canopy that they're parking equipment underneath, they can put panels on the top. So again, the height limits would be governed by section 603, 50-foot setback, 10%, limited to 10% of developable land area. Again, because carports typically aren't going to take up as much space as someone was doing a ground-mounted installation. So in residential zones, small systems, including carports and canopies, are only allowed as accessory uses, and they do require a special use permit. Development plan review will be required for large systems. So again, those are systems over 1,000 square feet. As I said earlier, our current regulations require development plan review for all systems. So this, for a small system that's very, under 1,000 square feet, it's a residential installation or something, pretty innocuous, then development plan review would not be required, although a special use permit would still be required. Landscaping and vegetation, so screening is required. Again, this is existing under the current ordinance, and that would continue. You need a screening around the perimeter of the installation. And then in terms of the vegetation under panels, for the ground mounted panels, that we'd be looking for native grasses or wildflowers. Site design, and a lot of this you already are familiar with. Underground utilities would be required. You need to prevent unauthorized access to the panels, whether through gates or fences, or if it's a carport, you need to ensure that someone can't get up onto the carport easily. For preservation and protection of wildlife, fencing, when there's adjacent wetlands, either wetlands on the site or adjacent to the site, 6-inch clearance under the fence is required to allow for wildlife to be able to get under the fence. And then outdoor lighting would be in compliance with our proposed Article 27B. So that's coming separately. As you know, we'll have a separate outdoor lighting ordinance at some point. If that doesn't happen before this particular ordinance is adopted, then it would basically revert back to what happens with our development plan review process, which is ensuring dark sky compliant lighting for any lighting that's necessary. In most cases, it might just be a security light or something, and there may be times when no lighting is proposed at all. And as I mentioned before, soil preservation is I think a new concept in this proposed revision. No removal of topsoil from the site. If you're going to alter the site, you need to preserve and stockpile the topsoil on site. No unnecessary disturbance, maintain the contours of the land, and only pile-driven or ballast block footings for the ground-mounted panels are permitted. So that's the presentation. That's the highlights of the ordinance. Be happy to answer any questions you all have. I think I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so I can actually see everybody.
Okay, members of the planning board, any comments or questions for Ron?
I've got a question. How about commercial installations, particularly on flat roofs? Do we require screening for that?
We will. I think under the proposed amendments to the commercial design standards that are, I think they were just adopted by the planning board and they're going to the town council, that would be considered rooftop equipment that would be required to be, would have to be screened, similar to HVAC equipment.
Okay.
Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, on the setbacks, I see setbacks here of 50 feet in a residential area. That seems kind of large, doesn't it? I mean, sometimes if you would, it seems like you'd need at least an R40 lot to be able to put one of these carports or, canopies in, if that was the case.
Yeah. Rita brought that up as a concern, I think maybe at the last meeting when we talked about this, and I think we left it, Rita, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we left it open for discussion, and if the board feels that that is too much of a setback, we can certainly revise that.
Yeah.
Also wanted to hear back from the public on that as well.
Sure.
Well, I can tell you the installation on Slate Hill, it's in the back of the property. It's not 50 feet from the abutting neighbor back there. It's more like 10 feet. So.
So is that good or bad that it's 10 feet?
Well, the abutter really hasn't said much about it. So I just looked at it the other day, and I've been walking by that house for years, looked over and I saw that thing. I said, holy cow, where'd that come from? But
Bill, are you there?
he was having a hacking areas.
There he is.
Yeah, I am here. I'm in the middle of trying to reset my computer, so I am half paying attention, not completely fully, but
Comments at this time, Bill?
I have no comment. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Anyone else have comments, members of the board?
I have another one.
Yeah, I do.
Well, okay, let BJ and then Mike.
Okay, I like very much the site design, and of course, I like the idea of the low protective fencing, providing for to go over it. I think that I'm particularly in favor of the residential one. number 1, number 3, and number 4, which is for a mobile home, I understand. Number 2 looks a little bit barren to me. The commercial is gigantic, so it looks like a football field to me.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons we want to have these regulations in place, is to allow for the proper oversight. So in a commercial situation like that, there would certainly be development plan review by the planning board, as well as a special use permit process. So there would be plenty of oversight, and which allows for, if there is some relief being requested, or even if relief isn't necessary, if there are concerns being raised during those hearings, they can be addressed by the boards.
Mhm.
Mike?
Yeah, I was a little bit confused by the wording on, where these items are going to, where these structures are going to be located. Is it assumed that they would be located in the front yard, or is front yard prohibited for location of these structures?
For
Go ahead, Rita.
for a carport or canopy, I think that's why we provided some of those pictures on the final page, is you would probably see them in a driveway, which would be considered the front yard or a side yard.
Yeah. So, I mean, suppose there's somebody wants it in their backyard. Suppose they have like a driveway along the side of the house and it goes into the backyard, and they want to have a canopy there with a solar, structure on top of it.
That's fine.
So would that be a special use permit, or would that be not permitted?
It would be allowed by special use permit. So any installation is going to require a special use permit. But yeah, it's certainly probably preferred that they be in the backyard. If the board is concerned about the appearance of these things, if they happen to be installed in the front yard, we can revise the draft to address that by adding language to prohibit front yard installations.
Do
Yeah,
front yard
just by the
installation-
wording of it, I'm not sure whether you're saying that it's preferred in the front yard or it's not preferred in the front yard.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it says at this point. That was my own take on it, is that I would think that the preference would be to do it in the backyard. If the board wants to make that clear, we can add language to the ordinance to either prohibit front yard installations, or make it softer and make it a preferred that the installations be in the backyard.
Paul, I have a comment.
Go ahead, John.
I'm thinking about this. Just think about this. I think we're gonna have to put it in there that it can be no front yard, because these solar panels are put where the sun is most effective. And if somebody has a front yard where the sun hits more than it does the backyard, they're gonna put it in the front yard. And I think it should be made that no solar panels can go in the front yard at all, side yard and backyard.
And that would
I
be
like that idea.
for residential. You're not
That's correct,
not
residential.
necessarily commercial, because you might have
Yeah.
canopies and whatnot.
Yeah,
in the
because
front.
people have trees and shrubbery and everything in their backyards. And you want to put these panels where the sun hits them the most. And for some people, it might be the front yard. So I think we should put it in there that's for side yards or backyards only in residential.
Art, did you have another question?
Well, we have people have installed some here in their front roofs.
Yep.
The street. And we're a little late in our condo association to ban that, but I think it looks I want to be kind when I say this. It's not aesthetically pleasing to see you put your panels on the front of somebody's house. But they're up there, so.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul,
So this ordinance is only for ground mounted though, right? Not roof mounted.
That's right.
Bill, you had something?
yeah, I just would be cautious on, I don't disagree with John's concern on the front yard, but I recall that it might be a quirky definition in the ordinance relative to what the definition of a front yard is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know we had issues, at least when I was there, with sheds being located in the front yard. If you look at what the definition is, it's a little different than I think how it's enforced, maybe, or actually I think it's more stringent what the definition is but it might allow for something in the front yard if we're not careful. I would
I
look
see.
at that a little bit closer on, maybe.
We can make it very specific that that it shall not be on the, I don't know how you word it, on the street side of the principal structure. So if there's a question of what does front yard mean, get very specific about it.
It might be, so I think it's, yeah, I recall, I don't have it in front of me, but I remember that when I was there.
Other comments?
John, I have a question for John. Are you recommending that carports and canopies also be prohibited from the front yard, or just a
No,
ground-mounted
because
solar?
I think canopy, carports are flat, kind of flat roofed. And I just think it's ground mounted. That, you know, they would have in their front yard, you could walk by if they didn't have hedges or anything like that. You're looking at a solar array. I would prefer that they would have it in the traditional backyard or side yard. But as Bill said, then we might have to look into the definition of what a front yard is.
Just a question. Does this contemplate?
Go ahead,
the,
Chris.
Just curious if this contemplates some of the more RT or artistic solar arrays that are out there. There are some that are designed to sort of not look like a panel. There's one called a flower. Or are we not getting that specific?
Oh, I ain't even seen those.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
It's pretty clever. It actually looks like a piece of art, and
Really?
it moves and follows, and then it actually folds up and sets at night. It's a pretty spectacular piece of tech. But
Wow.
I'm just curious. But I think we're all talking about the flat panel type installations, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess, Ron, the wording is going to have to be very careful.
So is there a consensus amongst the board members that we do attempt to prohibit front yard installations subject to getting the correct wording?
Yes.
Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was looking at these examples that Rita provided, of carports. Under residential, there was item number 3 there. That looks pretty nice to me for, a front yard type of structure where you could park your car. I don't know, would you have an objection to that?
No, I think we're just talking about the ground mounted panels would be prohibited from the front yard.
Yeah, that could be on picture 2 in those slides. That would be something that, the slanted one where you see it, you can walk by on the sidewalk and see it on the side yard. To me, that should not be there. It should be in the backyard.
So we're not talking about that item number 3 there in that picture. That's like an architecture design carport with a flat
That
roof
looks
that has solar panels on it.
Right. To me, that looks pretty good. It's like number 2, somebody sticks it in the front yard with a couple of poles 12 feet off the ground. Doesn't look great.
I agree.
Except on Indian Avenue, they look fine.
Other comments from the board? Okay, let's open it up to the public.
So
Anyone
if there's
from the public
yeah.
wish to comment?
Anybody in the public, if you wish to comment, feel free to raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you do a *9 on your phone to raise your hand. If you're on the Zoom app, you just hit the raise hand button. Got one. This is Javon Chan.
Hello.
Go ahead, Javon. Just introduce yourself, name and address.
Fantastic. Yeah, my name is Javon Chan. I'm actually a resident, of East Greenwich. I'm a solar renewables developer. I'm also a real estate developer. Thank you guys, members of the planning board, for taking your time to address my comments and questions. I just had a few. I'm a firm supporter, kind of a biased supporter of renewables. So I just had taken a couple of notes with respect to the comments made, and also some of the drafts that have been published. And I'll start with the most fresh one. And I realize and somewhat agree with the sentiments about front yard solar arrays. And, I particularly they aren't the greatest looking things. I'll be the first one to tell you that. So, I feel like there does need to be some aesthetic approach, obviously, to the design of these things. I'm very familiar with the flower. The flower is an oddball, but I also like well-designed trellis systems that are very decorative, very well built, and then the canopy supports basically a layer of glass at the top, which is fairly unnoticeable. What I do want to note is that I know there's been some language in the placed in the new ordinance or the new recommendations, and it does say that carports are to be considered ground-mounted solar array systems. And I read that in 400 in definitions. So, perhaps I'm not reading it correctly, but it does say a solar carport or canopy shall be considered a ground-mounted solar energy system. So as long as that doesn't get confused, where a carport canopy gets lumped into a ground mount. I'm not sure, if that's just a wording thing or if during the special use permit evaluation that you guys just automatically look at the carports and canopies separate from a ground system.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We can maybe work on that language a little bit to make sure there isn't that confusion, because I guess, we're considering them all to be ground mounted, but then, carports are a different animal. So I agree with what you're saying. We probably just need to revise the language a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, Ron, it is theoretically a ground mounted system. It's just a little taller, right?
Right. Yeah.
So the only other
system.
Yeah. The only other comment I had after looking at this, and I really like what you guys have done throughout this entire document. And the only other thing I wanted to note was at the end of the draft in the site design, I'm sorry, at the end of soil preservation, section E, again, if this is only referring to ground mounts, then that's fine. But if it lumps carports into this language, then I might suggest that we consider also adding sonotubes, because, naturally the carport will have to be supported by a concrete sonotube structure, which is about 4 to 5 feet round.
Right.
And could sometimes be 6 to 10 feet deep.
Yep.
So that I just caught that as I was reading these, and wasn't sure if that, if it's irrelevant because of this document or if it needs to be addressed. So
No, that's another good point. I think we can clarify to allow for carports to obviously have more structural integrity than cinder block ballast or something. So yeah. Yep.
Okay. That was really all I had. I'm a firm supporter of carports and renewables. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Comments were very helpful. Anything else?
Anyone else? Again, if you wish to speak, raise your hand. If you're on the phone, *9. I don't see anybody.
Ron, if there's no one else from the public who wishes to speak, do you think you should do some rewriting and send it back to the board to look it over?
Yeah, I think we've, in a very short period of time tonight, we've picked up on a few different items that need to be revised. So we can certainly get that done, run it by either Chris or Peter Regan, whoever's going to take the lead on this, and get a revised draft. I was thinking that we'd have a revised draft to get to the full board on the March 10th agenda, obviously not for tomorrow night's agenda.
Yeah, the next regular meeting.
Yep. So the March 10th agenda. So we'll have some time to make those revisions that we talked about tonight and run it by the solicitor's office.
Yeah, just send it over whenever you can, Ron, and we'll get after it.
Sure.
Could I ask a follow-up question to the board as well? We started to have the discussion about the setback for residential zone. And then I don't know if we wound up on an answer there.
So again, the concern was that the 50-foot setback, property line setback, I think it was Mike raised that as being a potential issue.
Does that apply to carports in the front as well?
I believe so.
Yeah, the line there is for residential zone, solar carport or canopy as an accessory use only. The height would be as per the accessory building height, and then the setback from property line is at 50 feet now.
For accessory only.
So that means that any lot with a dimension of 100 feet or less could not have a solar array.
Not without getting zoning relief, right?
No zoning relief, yes.
The question is 50 feet though, right?
Yeah, so we've got 25 in the commercial zones, but of course in commercial, the properties are typically larger anyway. So yeah, I mean, if 25 is acceptable, we could revise it down to that.
Why can't we go with what the front yard setback is for any structure? I mean, if it's going to be on a structure, the structure has to, you know,
Well, yeah, I mean, we could do that. Just go by the
what
the zoning setbacks, whether it's front, side, or rear setbacks.
I think that's a fair start. I mean,
What does that say? Please.
It depends on the zone. So
On the district.
each district has its own setback requirements. So they range from, I think 15 is maybe the lowest up to
15
20.
on the side, 25 in
Yeah.
the front would be in a 10 R10.
Yeah.
So it'd be 25 in the front and 15 on the side in an R10 zone. Then it gets bigger from there.
Gets
So
bigger from there. Yeah.
I think it does two things. I think it's an appropriate setback, and also it's going to have to be on a lot that really can support that kind of a setback.
all right.
You're not going to have a solar array sitting on an R10 lot. You probably have to get up to what, R30, Bill, you think?
Yeah, I mean, at least,
But this is not for arrays. This is for carports or canopies.
carport. I mean,
Right.
and most carports are connected to the house. I would think. I mean, at least I guess maybe some are, but if it's connected, then it becomes part of the structure, and it's subject to the setbacks. If it's accessory, technically, you're not supposed to have an accessory structure in the front yard. That's why I asked the question on the front yard.
Yeah, so that's what there's an amendment. It's in here. I think that's what Mike was speaking about earlier. It was on the very first page. Section 703 talks about accessory uses and structures. So right now, you're right, Bill. They would not be allowed in the front yard. The change in this draft would allow them in the front yard, but what I'm hearing from the board is that, actually, no, so it exempts carports or canopies. We had the discussion that arrays shouldn't be allowed in the front yard, but that carports or canopies would be. So the change on the bottom of page 1, section 703 would allow them in the front yard. As again, if they're going to be on a driveway, if they're a carport, you might see a
Right.
proposal come in for the front yard.
Exactly. No, I agree. So can we go with the setbacks that are in place already for the district? Would that make sense?
If that's what the board is comfortable with, sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
You okay with that, Art?
But
That's
And that
fine.
would apply in both commercial and residential, or are we just talking residential?
Why not both? I mean, residential is the most, I guess depending on how you look at it, what people's opinions are, I think to be consistent, we stay
Sure.
with what's there.
But we're not allowing solar installations on the ground in the front yard. Is that correct? Just carports and,
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Correct.
I'm okay with that. They still have to go for a special use permit. Who knows how the zoning board would react.
Correct.
Okay. You got that, Rita?
Got it.
Excellent.
Okay, any other comments? Anything else to bring up before the board this evening?
If anybody wants to buy some land on Mars, please check the emails.
Contact Bill Knight,
Can I put a solar array on it?
A solar array on Mars. yes.
12 feet.
I'd be selling them to you, yes.
Way to go, Bill. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Motion's made and seconded. I guess Joe never joined us. Mr. Chumo,
yes,
Mrs. Owen,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes, Paul, by the way, would you call me after the meeting, please?
I will. Mr. Fenton,
Yes.
Mr. Nash,
Aye.
I vote aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, folks.
night
We'll
all.
Good night.
See you tomorrow night. Yep,
Same bat
Yep.
time, same bat channel.
that's right.
Absolutely.